Hello world, I'm going to do a part 3 to my trying to debunk the myths of hi-fi videos that I've put up in the past. You have to excuse the mess behind me. I had a bit of a loafing around in front of the TV in the hi-fi day yesterday, so yeah, and I haven't tidied up yet, so never mind, you'll just have to live with it. Right, I do. Right, so I've got two myths that I want to try and, as briefly as possible, dispel today. Okay, the first one I don't believe I've talked about before, but it's the hi-fi run-in period. Now, this is a long running myth, really. Like all myths, there's a bit of truth to it, but it's not quite as rigid or as set in stone as it's made out to be. Okay, and the idea is that hi-fi needs a certain period of time after you've bought it, as in brand new out of the box, to run in, i.e. work properly and sound the best it's going to sound. Okay, now the olden days, in the days of yore, when a lot of hi-fi that people bought, in fact just about all of it, had moving parts, this was to an extent true. Okay, so it's still going to be true nowadays for something like a record player or a hi-fi cartridge. My Anya's taken, I think it took about 2 weeks or something to run in, i.e. the cantilever part which wiggles up and down, that's got the needle attached to it. That needs time because it's been sitting idle, it's not had a chance to sort of develop its full kind of amount of wiggle. I think that's called compliance. So yeah, it might sound just a little bit kind of harsh and brash out of the box, okay, but it's not, you know, it didn't sound awful. It's just that now it sounds absolutely jolly marvellous. Do you know what I mean? You know, it goes from sounding good to sounding, you know, absolutely great, and you'll be able to hear it as well. I think if you look at the two boombox classics that I put on YouTube a few weeks ago, to the Stephen Wilson album that I've just purchased, and I put a track of that on YouTube yesterday, so you know you'll be able to hear the difference in just how comfortable and relaxed, and also it's got a little bit smoother. It's not as treble happy as it was immediately out of the box, but you don't need to, it doesn't take months for that to happen. It took a few weeks of fairly relentless playing. You know, I've been through quite a lot of my albums and, you know, had a jolly good listen to them and stuff, you know, and now, you know, it sounds as good as I believe it's going to. I also had to play around with the tracking force a little bit, you know, just to make sure. I mean, it's now tracking at what I believe is about 1.9 grams, and I checked it on my Shaw stylus gauge, and yeah, it's fine. It's brilliant. That is understandable. An amplifier has no moving parts in it. Neither does a music streamer. You know, one of the sort of newfangled things which I don't really fully understand, but you know, in order to play high quality downloads, companies like Lin and Name have brought out, and Cambridge Audio have got a streamer as well that kind of streams music from your computer and and plays it Does that need a running period? No, not at all. It should be on song right out of the box, as should an amplifier. A pair of speakers probably needs a running period. Again, I've been looking at the PMC speakers online, and PMC's advice about running in is about 50 hours. So that's 2 days. Okay, and where you need to be just a little bit cautious is that if you buy something and you check the store returns policy, which says, you know, maybe 14 days, you know, if you're not happy with your goods and, you know, you want to return it. I've just checked actually, and in the UK, at any rate, there isn't a compulsory obligation on shops to return non-faulty items. So if you're not happy with something, you might be stuck with it. But if a shop has a returns policy and it says, you know, we guarantee that if you're not happy, we'll exchange it or refund it within 14 or 28 days, then they have to stick to that by law. Do not allow someone to say, oh, your speakers will take a month to run in, because they won't. Okay, you know, that may well be sort of beyond their returns policy, in which case you're kind of stuck with it. And it's kind of, you know, a chicken and egg situation as well. What's being run in? Either the equipment is being run in, or your ears are gradually acclimatizing to the sound that your equipment produces. You know, one way or the other, something is being run in, and I have a feeling that it's probably 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. So if you don't like the sound of your pair of speakers when you've brought them home and you've experimented, because you do have to experiment a little bit with the positioning. Some will sound brilliant near a wall, others won't. Keep them out of corners. Put stand mount speakers on proper speaker stands, and, you know, experiment with the amount of toe in to get a really good stereo image. And if you're not happy after you've done that, then you have a right to return it, and you have, you know, you don't have to listen to a store assistant telling you that it hasn't been allowed to run in, because after, you know, especially if you've got your hi-fi connected to your telly, within a week you could have run in your speakers for the required amount. Okay, and, you know, good on PMC for actually stating in their booklet, you know, in their instruction booklet, that they need 50 hours or so to run in. Riga don't do that, by the way, on their speakers, and the same will be true. You know, they'll, you know, a pair of speakers, 2 days, maybe 3 or 4 days perhaps of relentless use, and they should be perfect. They should be on song, and they should be sounding as good as they're going to be, which is well within, you know, a store's return policy. So, you know, just be wary of of the, you know, products need a running period, because they don't necessarily, if there's no moving parts in it, like an amplifier or a streamer. A CD player would probably need a little bit of a running period, but again, it's a couple of days of, you know, fairly constant use. You know, hi-fi reviewers will have special test CDs and equipment, and they can use white noise and pink noise and that sort of thing to give them a quick burn in. But yeah, you know, for you and me, it's 2 days. Okay, all right, so hopefully that's kind of cleared up, you know, my thoughts on that particular myth. The other myth that I'd quite like to chat about today is the, if it's expensive, it must be good. And closely related to that, if it's big, it must be good. And the reason that been thinking about that is because a couple of days ago on YouTube, my life revolves around YouTube, folks. on YouTube, I saw this video of this chap setting up a cartridge on this huge record player. Now, it had this massive platter, and it was made of some sort of aluminium or steel or something like that. I really don't know what the record player was, and neither can I remember the name of the cartridge, but the cartridge was some exotic several £1,000 moving coil jobby, and he was demonstrating the cartridge, and he was using this record player. Now the platter was like that, all made out of metal. I didn't know whether or not it was something that I could sort of walk up to and get a cup of coffee out of it. You know, those massive coffee urns that they have, and at the vicarage jumble sale. Yeah. And it must have cost a pretty penny. And it was playing through several tens of thousands of pounds worth of amplification, mono blocks, phono stages, preamplifiers, cables costing an arm and a leg, and you needed the National Mint or something to be able to buy this thing, and the speakers, gorgeous speakers, whatever, and then he went and played some music on it. Now, he had some test disc or other, and it had 2 mandolins playing on it. And then at the end, after the 2 mandolins, he said something like, "You should have heard the mandolins were made out of wood. Every detail of the strings." Right? Sorry? Someone telling me what I should have heard. I was listening on my iPad, and I was in bed watching it before I went to sleep or something, and it's so stupid. I mean, even with my turntable demos, I appreciate, and I perhaps should have said this long ago, I appreciate that you are not going to hear my turntable through YouTube. You're really not. YouTube, for a start, compresses the sound and mucks it up slightly, and but again, that's a bit of a myth. It's not that bad, I always start out with a good quality source thing. I use 24-bit recording, and then sort of turn it into an A4 or an Apple lossless file or something like that, just so that it's as best as it can be before it goes on YouTube. Yeah, they do compress it a little bit, but it's already a digitized recording, and it's not that great. Digitizing vinyl sounds fine, but not as good as the original vinyl. And also, you're not hearing my speakers, you're hearing your speakers. Even if you've got, really good speakers like my RS5s sitting behind me here, they're brilliant, but they're, and if it's an iPad or mobile phone or something, you're just not going to hear it. So, there's just no point. But this chap's demo record had tons and tons of crackles and pops on it for a start, which he wasn't doing a needle drop like I do, where I digitize it and then sync it to the video. He was doing a live recording in the room, so you could hear him moving about and whatnot else. And all the camera was picking up was the crackles on the record, probably because they were right in that audible frequency that was our ears are most sensitive to. But something that was fine in the room suddenly sounds terrible because the crackles are dominating everything. The next thing he played us was a cello, a solo cello, playing one of Bach's partitas. Now, both of those kind of recordings where you have individual players, and learn this, people, learn this for when you go and audition hi-fi. Take your music with you and take a variety of music. Take some music that's actually quite complex. There's a reason why I take Tatva with me by Kula Shaker and Sound of Drums by Kula Shaker. Not because, yes, they're fantastic songs and I like them, but they're also quite complex songs. There's a lot going on in them. A lot of instruments, a lot of layering, a lot of stereo moving around, I take Nitin Sawhney for that, for the stereo imaging kind of reason, and for the dynamics as well. Take a few problem recordings, ones you don't like, but to have these sort of audiophile demonstration recordings, most recordings should be audiophile enough, do you know what I mean? Even my Semi-Precious Weapons sounds quite nice when played via my Anya with my LXR amplifier. Just cuts through all the mush and just gives you the music. But a project debut and a Rotel amplifier and a pair of Mission speakers costing an nth of the amount that this man's hi-fi cost would be able to reproduce two people playing a mandolin and make it sound good. Because they're the kind of recordings where you've got one or two things going on. They're the kind of recordings that really flatter hi-fi regardless of its pedigree or how good or how bad it is, when I was 16 or something, I think the first time I heard a CD player, well, I was a bit older than that, but the first time I heard a CD player was listening to Suzanne Vega singing Tom's Diner, a cappella. It's going to sound brilliant, isn't it? Near silent background and one woman singing. You can't really go wrong, It would have to be awful to not sound good, And a cello, again, there's no difficulty for a studio to record a cello, and for a very, very cheap system, anything but a Crosley or, something of that ilk, a record player with a ceramic cartridge and inbuilt speakers, that's going to sound terrible regardless. But anything with any kind of serious pretensions to hi-fi, a cheap project turntable, as I said, a cheap Riga, whatever, it's going to sound brilliant with that cello, except that, nothing on earth will stop a solo cello from sounding like absolute purgatory anyway, I hate the darn thing, It's fine in a concerto, Dvorak cello concerto, you've got the rest of the orchestra to kind of, complement the cello's kind of weaknesses, as it were, but just played on its own, purgatory anyway, but, it was well reproduced purgatory. And, this man's huge hi-fi system might have reproduced it better than the project, but the project is still going to make it sound good anyway. Those kind of recordings flatter any system, okay? So, just don't be flattered by it, oh wow, it's blooming amazing. And again, he told you exactly what to listen out for, the exact nature of the cellist bowing. Oh no, but nothing about the actual heart of the music and the expression in the music and what those what that's kind of conjuring up for you when you're listening to it. I don't listen to the prelude to Tatva, which is Sleeping Jiva. I don't listen to that and think, oh, can I hear the actual plucking of the strings and what? I want to smell the incense. I want to see, in my own imagination, what is going on while they're playing, and what does that, do for me inside. It won't come from a very clinical demonstration of hi-fi, via audio file recordings. Okay, and to go back to this, if it's expensive, it must be good. I think there's a law of diminishing returns, and the fact that this thing was huge, this turntable was enormous and looking like a coffee urn, kind of, I suppose, backed it up. And yes, there are differing philosophies. Some believe that a high mass plinth and a huge platter sounds is as efficient as a lighter one, but Riga's Planner 6 is totally the opposite of that. Riga's mentality is to kind of strip away anything that they deem as unnecessary, and the new Planner 6, which with an Anya cartridge costs £1,400. I think it's 1398, something like that, and you might need a moving coil phono stage to go with it, so get the Rega Phono MC, which is £249. You've got 1,600 or so pounds, and you've got yourself a deck that sounds absolutely fantastic, for that price. Yes, if it's very cheap and not particularly well built, and using the bargain basement components and everything, it's not going to sound as good as something more expensive. But there comes a point where £100,000 worth of equipment or £5,000 worth of equipment that it will sound brilliant. Both will sound brilliant. Okay, so yeah, that's really, I don't know whether that was a myth that I dispelled there. I just think that there's a law of diminishing returns that comes in, and you could spend a lot less and get a lot of enjoyment out of your hi-fi. Okay, so here I will end Death the Lesson. Sorry about the mess behind me again, and I will speak to you another time. Enjoy your records, enjoy your CDs, and your Spotify's. Actually, tell a lie. I've just subscribed to Apple Music, and although it's not as good as my record player, I listened to Stephen Wilson's To The Bone album on Apple Music, and I've only been subscribed to Apple Music for a few days, so I haven't had a chance to have a look at it immensely because I've been playing my records too much. But I listened to Stephen Wilson's To The Bone album on Friday when it came out on Apple Music, and I'd already ordered the vinyl. I pre-ordered it, so that came the next day. But yeah, very listenable. Not as good as the vinyl. Nowhere near as physical and chunky and meaty as the vinyl, but still very presentable. So provided that you choose your components carefully, that you're going to listen to it through, then these things can be reasonable, shall we say. Anyway, laters, bye.